Though I have it, I'm going to have you just say and spell your name so I make sure I pronounce it correctly.
Okay. Jeremy Olenski. Jeremy Olenski.
First off, talk a little bit about what this year has been like for you. A 19 strikeout game, a 20 strikeout game, a no-hitter. I mean, the list goes on and on. As a high school senior, what has this been like for you?
It's been mind-blowing. It's bigger than anything I could ever imagine. It's what I dreamed of as a kid. You know, whether going outside, hitting the wiffle ball around, playing catch with Dad. It's been a great experience.
Now, normally Whitney Point isn't necessarily known, and this whole area really isn't really known as a baseball hotbed. Yes, we have Jimmy Johnson, but what does it mean to you to be maybe that next guy coming from this area?
Again, it's just mind-blowing. Again, everything I've ever dreamed of. To be that guy, it's almost surreal. It's unreal to me. Just to wake up every day and just to think that your name could possibly be famous someday. It's just amazing. Have people come up and ask for autographs. It's just amazing.
Jeremy Olenski became famous for his impressions and magic tricks on the former social media platform Vine. But long before he brought joy and laughter to people around the world with his performance art, he had a much different career trajectory. This is the story of Jeremy Olenski.
What is my earliest memory? So this is really interesting because I swear to people that I can remember the moment I was born. I know it's not true. Nobody remembers the moment they were born. But I distinctively have this memory of driving home in a car and opening my eyes for the first time and seeing a beautiful sunset in Binghamton, New York. But excluding that, my earliest memory is one day I woke up my father. It was really early in the morning and I was in pajamas, probably like 5 or 6, where I said, I want to make a movie. My dad got out his video camera and I went downstairs with my father. So he gets out this thing, he just starts filming me. And I went on, I got all my toys, I got a board game and I flipped it over to create a base. I put all my toys on there and I just started playing in front of the camera and I made a movie right there. About Mr. Deer and the Caterpillar, and I watch that about every year, and I just to relive it basically and see how young and not a care in the world and full of imagery and imagination when I was younger. And I think, that's probably my earliest memory because I remember that day that I got him out of bed. I was so excited when he agreed to film me and make my first little movie. What were my career plans? Well, I would say the first time I even started thinking about a career, when I'm younger and I'm drawing, it's like, am I really going to be an artist? Like, that sounds dreamy, but everybody knows the phrase starving artist, right? So I knew that probably was never going to be the actual route, at least at the time. Now we got video games and movies and stuff, and you could just be a concept artist and make bank. So now it's different. You can be very successful as an artist. But growing up when that wasn't necessarily the scene, and you had to be an animator at Disney and all those jobs are already filled, it's kind of like, Jeremy's not going to be an artist, but that's what he likes doing, but he'll figure it out. That's when the baseball came around. That was kind of like middle school when you kind of really want to start actually thinking about what you might want to get into. When you're in high school, then it's college, then you got to make that decision, But for me, from middle school on, it was always, you're going to be a professional baseball player. From middle school on. And if you looked at my yearbook, you'd see most likely to be famous in there. Not for voices or other things like that, but it would be because of the baseball. Everyone knew Jeremy Olenski, baseball player, going to be drafted. That was the hope. That was the news. That was what the news was saying. And so the career path, like I said, from the very minute I could think about it, it was a fait accompli that I would be in the major leagues pitching baseball games. My uncle is a diehard Yankees fan. Even though their dad was a football player, they like baseball. My uncle liked baseball. And I remember ever since I was a young kid, he would take me out back, my dad and my uncle, and we had this little pump you could step on and it would blast a little plastic baseball up and you could hit it and run and get it and repeat. Run and get it, reload it, pump, hit the ball, repeat. And so that started my love for baseball. And basically, my uncle took me to a few Yankee games and when I was young. And the more he took me every single year, the more my fandom grew, not just for the Yankees, but for the sport of baseball itself. That's when my dad bought me a bucket of baseballs, and he had a barn that's out behind my house. That's where I learned to throw hard, at least. He taped a square on the barn. Now, the reason we had to tape a square on the barn is because earlier I had something called a pitchback. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically a net that's bouncy. And you could throw the ball into it, and it would come back to you, and you catch it again. And you could constantly do that, and if you had a little square with tape, so you could be a strike thrower. That worked for the first 2 years. But I threw so hard at one point, I remember specifically, I broke a string, and the ball went right through. And I was like, uh-oh, like I'm throwing too hard. The more you throw, the more muscle builds, the harder you throw. At one point, the strings would not sustain it, because it's for middle schoolers, right? And I was throwing 78 miles an hour in middle school from this pitchback. I was obsessed with baseball. That's all I did. And so my dad got me a new one, a soccer one. It's a beautiful, very expensive one. It's all I wanted, and we were certain it was going to hold. And I remember we set it up in the backyard, and my first throw, right through the net. We realized the nets weren't going to work anymore. Didn't matter what net it was, it's not going to work anymore. Because I was almost throwing 80 miles an hour in middle school. So my accuracy wasn't very good. That's another conversation, but I threw it hard. But it went through the net. So my dad said, well, we got to do something. So we put tape on the side of the barn so that I could throw at something that wouldn't break, we thought. I destroyed the boards. That was actually in the news article. When the news, they said, throwing balls against his father's barn, breaking a few boards along the way.
A Whitney Point senior started pitching as a little kid, honing his craft by throwing against his father's barn, breaking a few boards along the way.
So my dad, all the way through high school, let the entire left side of his barn deteriorate and chip every throw. I could have gotten through that entire side of the barn if I continued throwing, But eventually he replaced it, and we were like, we better build something sufficient in the backyard. So that we put sticks in the ground, and we got really good netting, and then the mud flap of a tractor trailer on chains, and that was my strike zone. So we built something, we measured it out, put a rock there, and I threw there for the rest of my career. I played my whole life in Shenango Valley, but when you get to a certain grade level, you have to play for your school, and that's Whitney Point. That's where I went to school. It was a little small hick hillbilly kind of area, and I think everybody that goes there will agree. Not saying everybody that went there is one, just saying that's kind of the rap they get, right? In upstate New York. And so that's where I was from, very small school, not a lot going on. So for anybody to come out of that is amazing. The article they wrote on me, they called The Diamond in the Rough. So I had to join Whitney Point baseball team, and it was the first practice where they were trying to figure out who's a pitcher, who's a position player. And they said, hey, lefty. They didn't know my name. And they were like, come over here and play. And try to pitch. Let's see if you're a pitcher or a position fielder. Well, I knew I was a pitcher because I had been throwing for the last 3 or 4 years, up against my dad's barn. So the catcher's sitting there. I'm like, okay, I'll throw. This is modified baseball in Whitney Point. So I start throwing, and the guy is like, what? You know what I mean? He's like, what the hell, And the junior varsity coach, his name is Coach Samsel. He's actually a very good friend of mine to this day. Was walking by because we had to share the same gym. And the junior varsity was on one side, modified was on the other. And I was throwing harder in modified than anybody on junior varsity. So the two coaches had a conversation. Coach Samsel talks to my coach Morgan and says, can we get him on junior varsity, immediately? And then the process began of transferring me from modified to junior varsity after my first day of practice. I remember me and Samsel, he would drive me home sometimes, we gotta get you on the team, how are we gonna do this? And he would hold my leg up, trying to support me because I was failing the bent arm test. You know what I mean? We tried everything we could do. Eventually, I practiced enough where I passed the test and went to junior varsity. I threw fast, but I was very inaccurate, and that's when I went to Raleigh Baseball Institute, and I worked with Joel Bennett, who was a Philadelphia Phillies pitcher. And when I went in there, he basically told me, get the radar gun. This kid's throwing really hard. And that's when I found out that through natural growth and natural progression, I was throwing 88 miles an hour in high school after a year had went by. And so his goal was to get me more accurate. I had a lot of strength behind me, but I did not have a good accuracy. I couldn't throw strikes for the love. If I threw a strike, it was lucky, you know. And they worked with me very hard. He basically told me one day, I was like, I'm just a mental case. I don't know what to do. Like I might fail, you know. He's like, are you gonna feel that way when you're in front of 25,000 people? And when he said that, that's the moment I realized this is real. Like I have a chance to be drafted with how hard I'm throwing, and you know, I'm a rarity. And that was the moment where it hit me. The guy that actually pitched in the major leagues is basically saying, you will be pitching in the major leagues, you know. So if we got to do this stuff, you know. So I worked with him for years. I finally got to senior year. It's my last year in high school. And at this point, I had 6 Major League Baseball scouts watching me throw. My coach, Samsel, my good friend that I mentioned earlier, that took me all the way from junior varsity, worked with me with Joel Bennett at Raleigh Baseball Institute. We worked for 3 years, and I fixed my accuracy. All the kinks weren't necessarily worked out, but one thing that everybody told me was that you're throwing very, very hard, and your arm whip is faster than anyone I've ever seen. And this guy pitched in the major leagues. So you start doing these, you start thinking, you're like, I'm the fastest arm whip you've ever seen. You pitched in the majors for a couple of years. You know what I mean? You've gone through the minors. You've gone through lots, and you're telling me this? So you think that's a good thing. Wow, the fastest arm whip I've ever seen, says a major league pitcher. Think that's a good thing, but turned out to be a terrible thing. So what ended up happening to me was kind of unbelievable. Here I am throwing no-hitters in front of Major League Baseball scouts. The Toronto Blue Jays scout came to see me, the New York Yankees scout. I had a New York Yankees questionnaire in my hands. That is my team. The New York Yankees is, you know, to have their questionnaire, to be scouting me. I was reached out to Matt Hyde. He's still scouting baseball players across the United States to play on the Yankees. And here I am filling out the questionnaire for the New York Yankees, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Cincinnati Reds. I think the Mets was the other one. I'm not so certain. If it was the Red Sox, I might have to think about that because you know the rivalry. But anyway, I would have went wherever the offer was good enough, right? But the dream is the Yankees, of course, right? From upstate New York. Uncle Mo loving them for years. It's just what I was raised on. So life was really, really good. Things were looking very up. I'm sitting here like, the fastest arm whip he's ever seen, you know. And I'm like, you know, and my grades were very poor. I knew that after high school, if I don't get immediately drafted, my backup plan is to go to a college and get drafted then, you know. I had the mentality that it doesn't matter, school, I'm going to be a baseball player. They're not going to deny my talent. I learned very quickly when Binghamton University reached out to me and they had me come tour and they got me so excited and they were like, oh, we're going to give you a scholarship and you're going to be here. It's going to be amazing. We love you, but you need to get your grades up or we can't take you in. That was the real moment where everything mom was saying, everything dad was saying for years was true. I was not going to be able to get into any college unless I got my shit together in school. So I got through high school as an honor roll student. I still can't believe I say that. I won awards like most improved student, you know what I mean? When you put your mind to it, you can do it. A lot of us are smart, you know, but it's about putting in the effort, you know, and I realized I was just a pretty smart person. I just didn't want to show it, you know what I mean? I didn't want to do all that work, that's like homework. You know, I was obsessed with girls at the time. I didn't care about that, but when they say, hey, you can't have this if you don't have that, and it's very apparent to you, boy, you'll be amazed what you can do. So, yeah, so that's the high school story. And so here we are, you know, waiting for draft day to come. Is Jeremy going to get drafted out of high school and become a baseball player? Of course he is. Well, here's one thing that we all didn't really understand. This is when it gets a little interesting because I actually got to sit down with a scout. Now keep in mind, before I got to sit down with a scout, I had 6 of them come see me. And for some reason, I really stepped it up when they were watching me pitch. Like I thought, you know, this is the scariest moment of my life. I'm already scared pitching in front of everybody. Everybody's coming to see me throw. Look at this big shot in upstate New York that's going to be drafted, you know? That the news just did a thing on me, you know what I mean? So like, I got a lot of stress. But when the pro scouts are there, that guy right there can decide whether or not to hire you, to give you millions of dollars. You know what I mean? To talk with the owner of the Blue Jays or whatever it might be and say, this kid's worth it. That guy is there with a radar gun and a video camera and a notepad. And I'm up on the mound, and I threw a no-hitter against the team. My first time I had a scout in the audience. It was a Blue Jays scout. But the one thing they all said was tall, athletic, has a good, foundation for growth, but mechanics need tweaking. And I think when they all said mechanics need tweaking, that meant uses his arm too much, needs to use legs. They just didn't write it, but that's what they meant. Except for one guy by the name of Lee Saris. He basically said, let me just tell you something. He was like, last night, there are only 6 Major League Baseball teams saw you. We're one of them. He goes, last night, we all called each other. We all know, right? We knew that we were the only ones to see you. And we all said, don't tell anybody else. Don't let it get out that this kid is out here, because diamond in the rough, it's, the less competition there is to get him, the cheaper we can get him. Because baseball is a business after all, right? He told me, we're planning to lowball you. They're planning to give you, bottom 10, but your top 10 rounds material. So if you know about rounds, when you're getting drafted, anything below the top 10 can be signed for whatever, $200,000 maybe even less than that. The top 10 rounds in that first or second round, you get like $5 million signing bonuses, right? So you can make millions of dollars from the minute you're signed. And he said, you are top 10 rounds material, but they're treating you like the bottom round because you're not exposed. So he said, now a lot of kids jump at any money they get. Oh my God, the Pirates want to sign me. $25,000, I don't care, I'm going to be a professional baseball player. He said, don't do that because that's your one shot. That's your one shot to get that money, because the sad truth is a lot of people don't pan out in the majors. So he said, my recommendation to you is to deny what anybody gives you, including us, this year, and go to a community college, because if that coach is worth anything in community college, and he will be, he will have all 30 Major League Baseball teams there, which means there will be a bid for your services, and you will get the money that you deserve, which is top 10 rounds, not the 30th or the 29th, which is what we're all thinking, right? So this is a business. Like I said, he told me flat out, if you had more scouts come view you, you could be drafted out of high school. Also, he told me before he left, he said, by the way, he was like, we'll all be there next year to draft you. He said, by the way, you're gonna suffer a severe upper arm injury if you don't change your mechanics. It's exactly what Corey Mascara told me. And he said, you don't use your legs, you need to use your legs. So I knew my next step was to find a community college. And the reason to find a community college is because you gain an extra year of eligibility to be drafted. So say something happens and you get injured. Say something happens like that and you have to miss a whole year. Well, it's cool because you have an entire year. And so it was up to me. So I decided I'm going to go somewhere in New York so my family can travel and watch me pitch, because they're such a big part of me. My dad, my mom, I could have never done it without them. And I know it's corny, everybody says it, but it's just true, right? When you have a supportive family. So I wanted to make sure they could see me pitch. I get an offer from Monroe Community College in Rochester. We built a $500,000 brand new field with turf and an inside. We got hot tubs, we got pools, just like blowing me away with all this stuff. I'm like, okay, I'll come take a look. I go in, very impressed. Guess what? It was an art school. And then they said, oh, and we'll give you a full scholarship for 2 years. So it was a no-brainer. This was like, this is the place for me. So here's where I'm at. Brand new place, brand new dorms, baseball players. I'm a baseball player roommates. I'm a starter on the team, full scholarship for 2 years. Beautiful facility, brand new. And I'm going to be drafted next year. This was as good as it got. Quite literally, that's as good as it got. So I meet my roommates. We spend a couple days setting up our entire, apartment, basically kind of like thing, dorm room, I guess. And we're setting that up. And it's like, okay, let's go to practice. It's time. Let's see what you're made of, Olenski. You know, I've heard a lot about you. Why are you starting over me? You know, I got a lot of that. Like, why are you? I've been here for 2 years and you're starting over me, like other pitchers. You know, why are you starting over me? It's like, I'll show you why. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like getting that little cocky but friendly kind of attitude and stuff. And so here I am. And they're like, Olenski, let's see what you got. And keep in mind, these people never even wanted to see me pitch at Monroe either. The word of mouth was good enough. They didn't. Every other place, let's see what you got. They were like, full scholarship. It's fine. You don't have to pitch for us. You don't have to pitch and show us what you got. So I was like, well, I better show them what I got. You know what I mean? Like, they put so much trust in me through word of mouth that they're going to give me a full scholarship for 2 years. And I got these guys saying, why you, right? So I'm pumped up. I'm like, I'll show you why me, you know? And so here I am on this beautiful field. It's like a practice field, you know. Time to pitch, Olenski. Let's show him. So I'm facing my roommate. I'm used to not getting any contact. And he hits the ball almost immediately with the second pitch and pops it up. It's an out. The guy caught it. I'm like, great. So then this next guy comes up. I strike him out. This next guy comes up. I strike him out. This next guy comes up. He hits like a double. And I'm like, Jesus, these guys are better than like, you know, than I'm used to or whatever. Then I got out of the inning and it was good, smooth sailing. But I was using my slider and stuff a lot. So the coach wanted to see what I had. Because like I said, they didn't see me yet pitch. And so he was calling like sliders and stuff. They hadn't really seen a lot of fastballs. So this time around, he's like, fastballs, Olenski, let's see your fastball, right? And so here I am getting ready to show this 92-mile-an-hour fastball. And I remember I threw one really hard, like right down the middle. And he was like, strike. And he popped. And everybody was like audible, like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, wow. And so I threw another one, strike two. And then this next pitch, I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm gonna throw this really hard. Like I wanted to throw 98 and show these people why I'm starting, you know. So I'm thinking like this is gonna be the hardest pitch, you know what I mean, that I'm gonna throw today. So I wind up and I come set, and I wind up to here and let it rip. I'm thinking, and I deliver and I follow through, and a loud snap was heard, and it echoed throughout the dugout. The ball went left into the dugout to the left of me, and my arm went jello. And I had no control over it. And everybody said, what just happened? And I grabbed my arm and I held it and supported it because I wasn't sure what was going on, but I knew I couldn't control my arm. And I was just walking behind home plate, just wandering aimlessly. And I remember my coach and everybody going, oh, what the, you know. He comes, he goes, have you had any history of injuries at all? And I'm like, no, like none of this. And he's like, all right. He's like, well, get him to the trainer. And then some teammate that I just met, you know, like, come into my car. He's like, Johnny, drive him to the trainer. He drives me to the trainer, and I remember it so clearly. Every turn this kid took in this car, it was like one of those trashy cars, you know what I mean? Every one he took was like swinging my arm, and I could feel it just swinging, and it was so painful. It didn't hurt when I heard a snap, so I didn't know what happened, if it was a ligament or what it was. At this point, I don't know what it is. And so we get to the trainer. What happened? I just threw a pitch, and we all heard a loud snap, and the guy's like, yeah, it snapped. And I'm like, yeah, it snapped, and it was loud. And he was like, all right. He's like, it's probably Tommy John, you know, the very common ligament injury that pitchers get, which makes sense. You hear a snap, just like this, and the ligament's broken, you got to fix it, and you're out for a year. So then the trainer just goes, all right, let's bend you and lift. So he grabs my arm and lifts it up over my head. And that's when I started feeling immense pain. Like the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. He's bending my arm up over my head. Then I realized that the bones were breaking and that they were grinding on each other. So I started to feel bones grind on each other. And then I realized, I think I broke the arm. I think I broke my humerus bone throwing the baseball. And I remember calling my dad saying, Dad, there's an injury. He's like, oh, jeez. You know, like he was so happy. Because like, this is the cool, what did you do today? You know, like this is the moment we've been waiting for. And then I got injured, you know, and you could just feel it just come out of him. And he's like, I'll be right there. So he comes over and he sees me in the trainer's room. And he's lifting my arm up and he's bending it. And I'm like, this is excruciatingly painful. And he's like, it's fine. I'm like, no, like, this is really bad. And my dad's like, that sounds really bad. Like, probably should not be bending him that way, you know? And so he's like, well, send him to the dorm and we'll reevaluate him tomorrow. So I go back to my dorm. And at this point, whatever that guy was doing, bending my bones, I now feel them grinding still, you know? And I'm like, Dad, I feel bones touching. He's like, what? I'm like, I feel bones touching. I broke my arm. And he's like, how do you mean you broke it? I'm like, I threw a ball and it snapped. I was like, that's what that loud noise was my arm snapping. My dad's like, I don't know. I was like, call the trainer and tell him I think it's broken and I need to go to the hospital. So he calls the trainer and he's like, Jeremy thinks it's broken. And the guy's like, oh, it's not broken. He's like, no, Jeremy thinks it's broken. He's like, well, if it eases his mind, let him go to the doctor, and they'll give him an Xray. My dad says, it eases your mind. I'm like, let's go, you know. So like, because I know my body. You would know if you broke something, you know. So there we go. We go to the hospital, and the doctor's looking at my arm, and I'm a left-hander living in a right-hander's world. So my right arm is stronger naturally than my left. You would think it'd be opposite because I'm left-handed, but I have to play by everybody else's rules. I have to use my right arm for mouses on a keyboard. You know, I have to use my right arm for a lot of things. And so I was always stronger, my right arm. And so this time my left arm was massive, like really big. And you would think as a pitcher, that's a lefty, the bicep would be bigger, but it's not. My shoulder was huge and my back muscles were huge. The bicep wasn't, and I realized my bicep was really swollen, the whole thing. And I showed the doctor, and he's like, that one's definitely bigger. I'm like, yeah, that shouldn't be that way. He's like, but you're lefty. And I'm like, yeah, but trust me, my right arm's bigger. Again, I know my body. And he's like, all right. He's like, I don't think you broke it. He's like, you just threw a baseball? I'm like, I just threw a baseball. He's like, I don't think you broke it. He's like, but let's get a test. Let's do an X-ray. He sends me through a CAT scan. You know, that thing that you're going into a tube, basically. And we come out. And I'm just awaiting test results, and I'm sitting here with my dad like, I hope it's broken. Like, I don't want to, if it's broken, there's a chance I don't need surgery, you know, depending on how bad the break is. So I hope it's broken, because I could be up and running in like 4 months pitching this year. Tommy John, I'm out a year, you know, or more, a year or more. So I'm hoping I broke my arm. That's like the best case scenario. And he comes back, and he's like, well, and he slaps up the X-ray. He's like, you did break it. He's like, look at that. See that? That's my arm from throwing a baseball. Okay, so he throws that up there, and he's like, look at that. And we're like, okay, so where do we go from here, doctor? And he's like, well, you know, we gotta get you in a cast or something. We can't. And by the way, this took me 4 days to get to the doctor. I had a broken arm without a sling or a cast for 4 days. Okay, so like in the dorm, something I left out. And so basically we go to a doctor at home. I go back home. It's like, because I was majoring in art. I couldn't even draw, right? So like, hey, at least you can do the thing. No, you can't, because you can't use your left arm, right? So I'm basically like, I'm going home. I'm on leave. I contacted the school, and I'm like, I can't do anything. I've just had a very traumatic experience. And they're like, okay, no problem. Take your time. Come back when you're ready. So I go home, and we see a doctor at home, because we had tried to reach out to Dr. Bronstein, who is a sports orthopedist. It's a very good one that a lot of professional athletes use in Rochester. It's better than at home in Binghamton. The doctor is there. But I had no choice. We reached out to him. They said, oh, he's very busy. I'm like, okay, so I can't get Dr. Bronstein. Let's go home. And I saw a different doctor there, who basically, when he saw my arm, he said my jaw hit the floor, and he said it was such a traumatic break. There's no way we can't do surgery on this. So then I went from like happy to like there's a break to like, wait, we have to operate on my arm? You know what I mean? Like, I broke my arm to the point where we need surgery by throwing a baseball? And he's like, yeah, this is destroyed. And it makes sense, because if you look at that thing, look at it. That's destroyed. It's in 3 parts. So I just started crying, because I knew that what that meant. I knew that what that meant was that I was not going to throw for this year, this entire year. And luckily I went to the community college, so at least I had that. I was also informed that I would be losing my full scholarship the next year, So, with not knowing if I would be throwing ever again, like I told myself I would, but I was like, this is scary, like, am I going to do that again? And then losing the scholarship and not even being able to draw, I was at like the lowest point in my life, right? And my girlfriend came out to support me, and like I wasn't even able to go to college, and I felt like I was being robbed of my entire college experience. So here I am getting ready. We scheduled surgery for like the next week. I'm praying like every day. You know what I mean? I'm just like, if there's a God up there, you know what I mean? Like, please help me. I'm just begging, I'm just begging me. Please don't let me have surgery. Please don't let me have surgery. I was so scared of surgery. I still kind of am. And this is the day of surgery. My dad wakes me up, and that's the morning of surgery. And I'm like dreading it, I'm like, this sucks. And he's like, hey, Jer. I'm like, what? He's like, come on downstairs. I'm like, all right. And he goes, how would you like to not have surgery? And I'm like, very much so. Why? He's like, just in the nick of time. Dr. Bronstein got a hold of me last night. And he said him and his team have been analyzing the email for a few days now. And they recommend no surgery. And I said, what? The complete opposite opinion from the guy that's a specialist in this field? I'm taking that. So we get our butts back up to Rochester. It's like 3 hours away. And we see Dr. Bronstein. And he basically explains to me that if they were to put a rod in, which was the alternative to fix it, it would create a stress fracture up here and down here. And the likelihood of me breaking it again would be high because it would create a stress area where it would break. But if a rod goes here and here, these are the two areas you don't want an arm breaking, near the joints. That's scary. You don't want to go anywhere near joints. So down the middle is the best. So he's like, we can't. If you're trying to throw again, right? I'm like, absolutely. He's like, yeah, no, we're going to fix this without surgery. So he puts me in this new technology, like this cuff. It's not a cast, but it serves as a cast that you can remove at any time. And it's Velcro, and it's like this cuff that kind of goes around and like this. And you pull it, and he gave me exercises to do. And he's like, you put this cuff on. He's like, you put your hand on your arm, and you just lift your shoulder. And just keep doing that. And what that's going to do is align your bones that look like this right now. And just start straightening them. And you'll feel your bones start to get sticky. It's crazy, right? You'll feel your bones start to get sticky. And eventually they'll stop. Like, it'll go from like, okay, they're touching to. Then all of a sudden they're just going to be too sticky to pull apart. Our goal is to get the bones to be lined up to the point that when it gets sticky and it gets stuck, that's a perfect heal, right? Without a cast. So I had to every day do these exercises and get an Xray every 2 days to see how these bones are realigning. And after like a couple weeks, we got a perfect result. Like, he's like, I couldn't have lined this up better if we had done it with a cast or a surgeon, Now there's a middle piece that you'll see in that 3D Xray spin thing. That there's a middle piece that he said, well, I said, what about that? That's not where it needs to be. It was still kind of out here. He's like, oh, that's going to disintegrate, and it'll fill it in. I'm like, whoa, what? He's like, yeah, that's just going to disappear, and then it'll fill it in right there. You'll be good. I'm like, bones are amazing. You know what I mean? So, like, that was like a big wow moment. So, I got that cuff on, and I spent the entire year healing up, watching my roommates come in after baseball games, after practices, and I had to live with them talking about practice and baseball and how amazing it is and all the girls and all the shit like that. And it was terrible. Like, it was absolutely terrible. It's like imagine you move out to Hollywood with these, aspiring dreams, and you're on the pathway to get there. You're a beautiful person. You have this new mansion with all these other actor friends, and they're beautiful too. Then you have a fire and your face burns away, and these beautiful actors go on to continue doing what they love, and you can't anymore, It was really crappy, but I had magic. I had voices. I could entertain them. I was like the hit of the household, because they were like, oh, Jeremy's cool. So that was kind of cool. It made me feel better. And I was able to do art again. I was actually drawing with my right hand for a few months while I had my cast on. And I got to tell my story to like everybody, like, yeah, I broke my arm throwing a baseball last summer right there in that field. And they're like, what? So it was cool. But then I was actually able to draw almost just as good with my right hand. I learned to get really good with my right hand. But then finally, and I passed all my classes in art, with my right arm while I'm not playing baseball. I'm healing up. So I just focused on my art now while I'm healing up, And so healing up, and I finally got the cast off. And here I am attending practice. So now I'm attending practice with these guys. And they're like, Olenski, start throwing. So here's the moment I can throw again. Holy crap. I get the ball. There's my partner. Let's do it. Let's get back to throwing. And I lift the arm with the ball, and then I go, and it just falls on the ground like a couple feet in front of me. And I realized I'm really scared to throw. Like, I'm terrified that this thing is not healed enough or that it's going to break again. Irrational fear. The doctor shows me the Xrays. The bone is healed. It looks really good. He says, you're good to go. Totally scared to throw. Now we have a new problem, one I didn't see coming. So I started researching this. I'm like, has anybody ever broken their arm throwing a baseball? Has anybody done this? Someone has to. I can't be the only person ever. 2 people did. 2 professional baseball players. The only professional baseball players to ever do it. Broke their arm throwing the baseball. Both lefties. Dave Javecki, I think is his name, had cancer in his arm, and so that's what did that for him. And so they immediately checked that for me and said, you're good to go. You don't have that. So it was just a stress fracture. And the other guy's name was Tony Saunders on the Tampa Bay Rays, and there's footage of him breaking his arm right here.
About letter high. Here's the set. The 3-2 pitch, a wild pitch back to the screen. Scoring from third is Alisea. It's ball 4, and Saunders is hurt. A wild pitch because something in his arm snapped. Saunders down on the field writhing in pain. That ball flew out of his hand and went way wide of the plate to the backstop. Jamie Reed, the trainer, out there. John Flaherty is holding Tony Saunders' right fist. It is clenched. And the Devil Rays have another ugly scene here at Tropicana Field.
To repair torn ligaments in his left elbow. And as he let that pitch go, the arm appeared to snap as well. As we took a look on the replay, and it appeared his arm was hanging limp.
Boom. Snapped. So that's exactly what happened to me. So that guy I needed to get a hold of. So the other guy ended up dying because of his condition, the bone problems that he had. But this was just stress fracture. That's what that guy had. So I was like, I need to speak to this guy because I need some peace of mind here. So my dad works his magic and gets a hold of Tony Saunders. And I get a phone call from this ex-pitcher. I looked at Tony Saunders' story, and it was really concerning because he re-broke his arm in the same exact spot, the same exact way, 9 months later, which is about where I was at. So my fear of breaking my arm again was validified that I should be scared to break my arm again because the only person it ever happened to that broke it the way I broke it had it break again, right? So I'm like, Jesus, so I call this guy and I'm like, hey, this is the situation. He's like, look, it happened to me. It was crazy. He's like, if you were my son, you would not pitch at all for the whole year. He's like, the reason it happened to me is because the doctor said it was healed up, and it wasn't. It wasn't fully healed up, he was like, so I trust your doctor, you should too, but trust me that, just because we don't know for sure, we need to definitely wait a year. So I waited an entire year to throw again. So I'm on vacation from school. I'm waiting just for my arm to heal up, and I don't know what to do with myself. I realize I'm extremely scared to throw again. So I get a job at my mom's diner, which is right next door. My girlfriend also gets a job there, and just kind of going through the daily routine, and until one day my girlfriend comes home from work, and she goes, "Hey, you should get a Vine."
Mouse talented.
You're a talented sponge.
Emma's talented. Oh, well, hiya, gang. It's me, Mickey Mouse. I got my pal Donald.
Hi, Mickey. What do you like?
The Lick Swaggy. He says Lick Swaggy. Like a question, Scoop. The act of getting high. Makes sense. Yeah.
Hey, man, your shoe's untied.
Oh, thanks, man. Better?
Have you ever wished that you could take a beautiful moment and make it linger? Or you could take back a mistake?
He keep telling me to chill, he keep telling me it's real, that he love my sex appeal. He said he don't like I'm bony, he wants something he could grab. So I pulled up in the Jag, Mayweather with the jab.
Oh my god! I'm on Sesame Street. Where's Big Bird? Big Bird's back at Sesame Street. Say it again. Huh? Where's your fish? Dolphin? Yeah. Dolphin's back at Sesame Street too. You think Big Bird and Oscar to the show? I thought she was at Elmo's World. Well, Elmo's World is show. Don't tell anybody. Do you know Big Bird?